I bet you know exactly how to find a locator right now. You go to your DevTools, you right-click on an element, you select copy, you select copy for XPath, and you end up with something looking a little bit like this. So is it a locator? Yes, it is. Is it a good locator? Absolutely not. This is called an absolute XPath, and it relies heavily on the exact order of elements on the page within the DOM hierarchy. So if the developer decides to add one simple wrapper div, or if they decide to move the elements inside the form, it just breaks. It is fragile, it is unreliable, it is hard to read, and it is the number one sign that you are trying to delegate the heavy lifting of thinking about your locators to your browser. And today we are going to find a remedy for that. We are going to stop relying heavily on the browser doing all the thinking for us, and instead we're going to write our own relative XPath. It'll be shorter, cleaner, and it won't break just because someone decided to make a small adjustment to the UI. And so let's open the console and try to develop such a locator from scratch. But before we do that, let me introduce myself. Welcome everyone to Testeroni. I'm Casper, and I'm here to help QA engineers become test automation engineers one slice at a time. So let's dive right in. So we are back at our login page, and the problem that has been pestering us for the past few videos. We have the login button. Remember, you can right click and select inspect. And on the right hand side, we can see that we don't have any ID to go off of. And the class attribute isn't really anything to go off either, because this is just styling garbage. So it's not really usable for us. So we need to focus on two characteristics: what this button is, so it's a submit type button, and what it says. So it says login. So let's go to the DOM hierarchy and try to develop a relative XPath that does just that. So let's, while you are here at the DOM hierarchy view, just press Ctrl F on your keyboard as if you were searching for something, and let's start creating the relative XPath. And what relative means. So you may remember from the beginning of this video that this was an absolute XPath. And this means that it follows the whole structure from the HTML, just going one element deeper with every slash that you denote. And the relative XPath does not really care about where the element is placed inside the hierarchy. It's just there looking for you what you tell it to look for wherever it is on the page. It's our way of telling the browser to look anywhere inside the page and find this specific thing. And the way to inform the browser and the script later when we get into scripting that we want this XPath to be a relative one and to look anywhere on the page is to use a double slash at the beginning. So let's do just that, and in the Ctrl F bar that happened to appear after we pressed the buttons, we start with 2 forward slashes. So now we tell the browser that it needs to look inside the whole website basically, but what it needs to look for. So we know that it needs to look for a button, right? Because we are trying to locate this thing, and this is a button. So 2 forward slashes and then a button. Okay, so we can see that it already highlights the button for us, the button tag. That's good. But this is a very simple website. In reality, you probably won't have just one button residing on the page. And so it's a pretty general locator. Yes, it does find a button, but it also finds all the other buttons. You can see that it found one of one here on the right hand side, but it may not be the case. If there were more hits, then you could just go through them using the arrows, the up and down arrows. So we need to be more specific in order to let the browser know that we are targeting this specific button. And to be more specific, we may utilize the attributes that are tied to a given tag. And in the case of this button, we can see that we have 2 attributes that we can go off of. One is a class, but as we have already established, it is a styling garbage, so we don't want to use that. But we also have the type submit. And this is pretty unique to that button because it submits the login form. And so it is pretty unlikely to change, and the type will probably stay of type submit. So we can try to utilize that. And to do that, we use square brackets and the @ symbol. So when you do a square bracket after a tag name in your locator, you are basically telling the browser that you will have some kind of filtering happening there. we can also just close the other things so that they are not making it harder to see. And maybe let's even enlarge this a bit more so that it's even more readable. So you can do square bracket, add, and after the add, you actually want to use the given attribute that you are trying to filter by. So in this case, this is going to be type. So type equals, and then you just do your typical quote sign that you would use anywhere else. So of type submit. And when you do that, you can see that again, it hits on this specific button that we were trying to aim at. And this translates to anywhere on the page, find me a button tag which has a type attribute that is of value submit. And this is exactly what's happening here, because we have a button, it has a type that is submit. And this is already pretty solid because we are targeting a specific button of specific type. It's pretty unlikely for more buttons to be utilizing that submit type, but still it could be even better. You may remember from one of the previous videos that we discussed that it's actually good to also target the content and not only the technical details. So in this case, we can target something that the user actually sees. So this is the login text. This is arguably even better because we are targeting something that someone may actually see on the website when they're trying to use it as a human being. So in XPath, we can do something cool which we can't do in CSS locators, namely we can target the text of a given element. And in order to target that, we can use a text function. So this is a specific function that you can use in XPath to target such things. So remember, we have the square brackets for filtering, but now we don't want to filter by the type. We want to filter by the text that's inside a given element. So let's remove that and let's do text. Here you use your typical parentheses to denote that it is a function. So this means that it's not some kind of an attribute. This is why we are not using the at the beginning. We are using the parentheses afterwards to denote that we are targeting the text element using the function text. And once again, you just do equals. And in this case, we have the text of login. So it equals login and we press enter and it doesn't work. So why doesn't it work? Because clearly you can see that it just reads login, right? So why the hell can't we actually target this button? So once again, let's inspect it and you can see the solution to this puzzle here. It looks like it reads login, but actually it has an invisible white space before that login, a space bar. This is this thing that separates the icon from the login text. And so the text does not equal login. And so we can just copy the contents of this here, but it still doesn't work. And why it may be, we are not going to get into why that is, but just keep in mind that it may sometimes happen that for elements which have some other children elements inside of them, you should try the text first, but sometimes it may be that it does not work. And the simple solution to that is to just, instead of this text, use a dot, a period, like at the end of a sentence. And now you can see that it starts working. It was not working for the text function, even though it exists in XPath and is very usable in various contexts. Sometimes when you have other elements inside of a given element and this text is not as readily available as it was, as if it would be if it was one level higher, you can just substitute that for a dot and it should work. But this does not really look too nicely, right? Because this is this weird white space, and so it's not really what you see on the page. So whether you want to base your automation on that or not is a pretty shaky ground. And this is basically a case with all string related scenarios that it may be pretty tricky to try and pinpoint them uniquely using just text equals or dot equals. And so we have another function for that inside XPath, which does not look for strings in a literal sense of trying to actually compare them to one another identically, but instead just finds whether a given element contains a given string. So to make our locator bulletproof, we're going to do a little different thing. So inside of our brackets for filtering, let's do contains. This is a function just as much as the text was a function. And what should it contain? As the first argument, we give it the dot, because remember, we are using the dot for the dot equals the login. And for the second argument, we use the login text. And you can see that now we are actually targeting the right element, even though we are not using the space here. We can use it and it will still find it, but if we don't need to worry about additional spaces or additional white space characters, sometimes invisible ones, which may not be so obvious to you when you are going through the website. So we may not want to actually provide all the extra spaces inside of our locators. So in this case, we are just looking for the login to be present, but whether it has a spacebar before or after, or if it has two spacebars, it does not really concern us. And now you might have a question of, yeah, okay, Casper, this looks good. We are targeting a button, and a button which contains a text of login. That's really cool. But what if the developer decides to change the button to an A tag, for example, so that it's going to be a hyperlink instead of a button? What would happen then? So your test would break. And the interesting fact is that it would break for good reasons, and it should break. Because yes, we can overcome this problem, because in XPath, we have a special character, an asterisk like this star, which actually functions as a wildcard. So you can use it to tell XPath that you are not looking for this specific thing that you replaced it with. So we are looking for a button. If we use an asterisk here, it is going to look for any tag, any type of element that contains the text of login. And this introduced a new problem for us, because let's see that now we have 9 hits, because the body contains that, the div contains that, this whole div encompassing the whole form contains that, and so on and so forth. And also the header contains the word login. Remember, we are looking for a match of a substring, so any part of this whole text that is inside a given element, it just has to match. So it does, because it has a login just as much as the button has a login, and so on and so forth. And yes, at the end of this whole hierarchy, we do find our button, or precisely this I, because this is the element that actually encompasses this text, but that's not really what we were trying to look for. So we went too general. Once again, our locator became too broad. So I recommend you to just try and shoot specifically to the element that you are trying to target, and then you can see that we have just one, because there is just one button that contains the text of login. So if the developer decides to change the button to an A tag, it takes 2 seconds to do that, and you are done, you are golden. So that's way better than trying to be too smart and having a bulletproof locator that is going to, withstand the trials of time until your grandchildren, because you don't want to be too smart with that either. You just want to be smart enough that the locator is not an absolute XPath, which is garbage and prone to error, but it's not really so general and so universal that it actually fails to be specific enough for the job. And now, just to drive the point home, let's look at what will happen if you try to utilize the copy full XPath option. So if you do copy full XPath and you paste it into your trusty old notebook, you can see that it actually tries to traverse the whole hierarchy, and it is not really ideal. The copy XPath, not the full one, is better, because if we try to do copy XPath, it's not that bad, because we are handily given an ID of login here for the form, so we can just go one element down to the button, but still we have created something that does not rely on external hierarchy at all. It shoots directly at the login button that we wanted to utilize. And so one takeaway I need you to take with you leaving this video is to stop using the automated copy XPath using your browser, because it either creates XPaths in the worst case scenario, which would break when you so much as breathe at them, but in the even best case scenario, ones that could be better and more precise and more elegant and less prone to error breaking or creating flaky tests. Write your own XPaths. Just double slash the type of the element that you are trying to target and some kind of characteristic like what it is, what it does, or what it says, using the text function, using the contains, using the dot operator if the text function fails on you, or using a given attribute, using the at, and then the attribute equals something. And so just before we leave, you may start thinking, yeah, but I heard XPaths are so slow, or CSS selectors are better, or CSS is better for that and XPath is better for this. You may have heard a lot of things about XPath, and you may have also heard some bad press about it. Is that really true? Is any of this true? To answer this question, in the very next video, we are going to actually put XPath and CSS selectors in the ring and see which one comes out victorious. So I heartily invite you to that video. Please like and subscribe to not miss that fight that is going to happen here. And remember to keep on rocking.